To thank Naresh and Amir for allowing me to give this presentation from a distance today, and I regret I couldn't be there in person. We're very happy to have been working on these warm season grasses for the past 30 years at REAP Canada, and we got interested in these grasses because we were looking for new ways to find new biomaterials and new energy sources from farms. And the beauty of the native prairie grasses is that they're they're systems of benign design and management. They just grow a lot of biomass with very little input, and they're really good because they improve soil fertility. So these native grasses with their root systems are unsurpassed in terms of a way to improve soil aggregate stability and soil carbon. So the title of my presentation today is on these genetically improving these warm season grasses for improving yield and quality, so that the grasses are easier to grow for farmers. And we started the field research in 1992, developing improved biomass cultivars of switchgrass and big bluestem. That's the big bluestem on the left, and the switchgrass on the right at the end of the season. And the nice thing about these grasses, they're adapted to less than best farmlands, and that helps reduce the competition for land. So when farm commodity prices are high, like today, farmers are looking not to grow these crops on their best quality lands, but on their less than best lands. And that's what we bred them for, was for less than best lands. And we've tried to make them easier to grow and faster to establish, and of course, higher yielding. And we tried to widen the maturity range so that we can do both fall and spring harvest systems. I'll try to explain that a little bit more if you're not familiar with that. So when we started in the early 1990s, we put in like 500 acres of these grasses at the beginning, and we had some pretty messy fields. And so they weren't very farmer friendly. They were slow to establish. And so what we looked at was how best can we turn this into a field crop, because really it was an unimproved native grass. And it was obvious that the crop required domestication. So what we did is we worked intensively in selection for seedling vigor. Most of this work we did in the greenhouse, and we went to 1-year breeding cycles. So we would start with, for example, 30,000 seeds in 1,000 of these cells, and we would eventually come down to 200 that we would bring to a breeding nursery. So the tray in front of me is our improved selections, and you can see how they're all single tiller. So rather than emerging with multiple tillers, we wanted to just have a single tiller emergence so we could get up and out of the weeds quite quickly. And so we just continue to work on this. And if you look at the very far left, those were the native grasses that we pulled out of an old 2006 field of Cavan Rock switchgrass, and that field was about 8 or 9 years old. And what we did is we did improved selection in the greenhouse and in the field using our visual selection methods for based on plant morphology. And you can see in the center picture how nice and uniform looking that row is. That's really looking like a row, like a field crop now. But on the far left, it's a very disorganized canopy. And we selected for a more erect growth habit with fewer tillers. And on the far right, you can see that's a pretty nice looking selection. And that's got very little side growth. It's all reproductive growth and very erect. So we've really transformed it from a wild species to a domesticated species over the past 15 years of breeding. And then we changed what the plant looked like. Before, the plant used to come out and it had these floppy leaves, and it just wasn't a crop looking plant. It was a wild looking plant, and we selected for what we call like a new ideotype, and we were selecting for increased height, reduced tillers, wider, more erect leaves, wider maturity, and glaucous bloom, which is like a blue-green color from the wax. And really what we did is we looked at lowland switchgrass and we looked at miscanthus, and we saw the great traits that those plants had for improving photosynthesis and we basically copied it and integrated it into upland switchgrass. Upland switchgrass is really hardy, and it has no major agronomic problems, but it just wasn't as high yielding. So we've turned it into a more resource efficient plant that's capable of producing more biomass now. And we've put these out on sites. We have sites in Quebec and Ontario that we originally started working with, and we've made major gains in productivity and ease of establishment just through visual selection and using a lot of plants in the selection process. So like I said, we start with 30,000 seeds, we end up with 200 plants, and we repeat that every year or every other year. And so now we've made up to 8 selection cycles on some of these materials. And what we've ended up developing is materials that are short season and long season. So for on the very far right is what we call the RC Big Rock, and it's about 155 days to maturity. And the far left is what we call the RC Blue Jacket. It's 130 days to maturity. So materials on the left side would be more suitable for northern zones or for fall cutting and fall harvest, and the ones on the right would be more conducive to late fall harvest, late fall cutting, and spring harvest. So we overwinter the crop. And so this gives us more of a portfolio of materials for the various regions in North America, in the upper Corn Belt and in the central Corn Belt. And in Ontario, for example, it's mainly the ones on the Tecumseh, Sundance, Chippewa, and Big Rock would be adapted, and Blue Jacket would be more adapted to, for example, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota. So these are some of our materials in field sites in the U.S. and Canada. This is actually in Illinois, about 2 or 3 hours south of Chicago, and our materials are the second and fourth one in this trial, and then there's some lowland switchgrasses there as well, which are more blue. And we've tried to develop our grasses so they're blue-green, and we find that works pretty well in northern environments. And we've really focused on the seedling vigor, and this is a trial at Bishop's University near Sherbrooke, Quebec. And this trial is at 12 weeks old, this photo. And so cave and rock is the material that most farmers would have grown in Ontario, for example, like 5 years ago. And now we have these new selections like RC Big Rock that are much more vigorous in their seedling vigor. And all of our materials now have like substantially better seedling vigor than the older materials that we're looking to phase out, like cave and rock. And then in terms of agronomic improvement, what we've seen is these no-till seedings. You can have like a 15-foot no-till drill. You can have a bigger air seeder like this one. And we've seen that we're getting superior stands. So we put on pre-emergent herbicides, and we no-till. We're getting much more reliable establishment compared to the photos I sent you at the beginning, showed you at the beginning. So, for example, these are 3 of our key seed growers in Eastern Canada: Don Knott in Clinton, Ontario, Normand Caron in Quebec, and Ron Tunders in Eastern Ontario and near Williamsburg. And they've each been licensed these materials. And you can see these are first-year seedings, and they're just excellent. Very, very, very good seedling vigor. Some of them would be getting up to 2 tons per acre in the seeding year. So the whole notion of slow to establish switchgrass, you got to wait a couple of years to get income. That's historically the case with the unimproved materials. But these are growing like field crops now. So this is Don and his son Dan Knott are upscaling quite a bit of switchgrass for seed production now. They would have about 300 acres in seed production, and this is a new 150-acre field of an improved selection from cave and rock called RC Big Rock. And we're trying to get the material now so it's 2 feet tall in 2 months. And this is a photo at 6 weeks, and it's about knee high already. So we've really found ways to get much more reliable establishment on these grasses. And the other benchmark we're creating is just like in corn in Ontario, they talk about the crop being knee high by the 1st of July. That's the old adage. And what we've set as a goal, as our benchmark for switchgrass, is to get it nose high by the 1st of July. And this is a picture from this summer of one of our improved selections, and we're exceeding that goal. So just excellent response to plant breeding these crops are providing us, and making it a lot easier for farmers to grow the crop. This is a picture from Don Knott from last summer, actually July 2020, and just a real robust looking crop, really doing well here. And we can use this for fiber, feed, and straw markets, and at the same time improve soils. So just a real nice looking stand, really productive, and easy to count on that it's going to give you income. So we talked earlier about this fall mowing and spring baling. This is what it is. We set up our windrows in the fall, and then if you look at the bottom right, it's left in the windrow over winter, and then we'd come in and bale it in the spring. So the advantage of this is that the nutrients are leached out and it's dead dry to harvest in the spring because we've got really good drying conditions. The other system we're working at more and more is fall harvesting. So what we did is instead of growing real late season materials, we can grow earlier maturing materials. And as long as they reach physiological maturity, these upland switchgrasses are really hardy. So if we can reach physiological maturity about the 3rd week of September, you can see the material up the slope a little bit, it's starting to yellow. That's an indication that it's reaching physiological maturity. And we can cut this and it won't regrow. And we've got pretty decent drying conditions at the end of September to harvest this material and potentially get higher yields than if we overwinter the material in spring harvest. So some of the exciting things that we've been able to do now is get these new introduce these new materials into the commercial market. And in 2020, we were selling in North America, and in spring 2021, we started our first seed exports to Europe. So we've got these ones here arriving in France, and they're primarily used for livestock applications and also for habitat for hunters. So it's providing conservation applications as well as farm applications. And this fall, we're getting some excellent harvests. You can see just on the left there, there's just a sea of seed on that field. Sea of seed, Don Knotts, and we're getting like excellent harvests, and we're going to have a lot of material available for sale this fall and winter. So we're really pleased that the farmers are picking up on this. We've got outstanding seed growers. Most of our seed production presently is in Ontario. Ontario's got ideal conditions for growing high quality switchgrass seed. We've got excellent farmers in Ontario with good infrastructure. And we hope this is a major export crop for leading switchgrass seed producers in the province. And today's a great KTT event around soil carbon sequestering with these warm season grasses. But in the past, we've also been involved in projects just improving switchgrass agronomy and how to use the materials. And these are a couple of guides that are on the Ontario Biomass website. Comprehensive Guide to Switchgrass Management. There's another one on livestock and poultry bedding applications. And there's another one on horticultural and straw mulch applications for these grasses. So there's a diversity of ways we can use them, everything from pulp and paper to livestock feeding to bedding, and a great soil improving crop. So we'd like to thank our research partners in our warm season grass plant improvement. In Ontario, our key partners are the Ontario Biomass Producers Cooperative, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and the University of Guelph. And we have testing across Canada, in Nova Scotia and in Quebec, and then in the U.S. we have performance trials in Illinois, Iowa State, South Dakota State, and the University of Nebraska. So if you have any questions, you can just send me an email, or you can ask some of the farmers at the meeting to answer it, because we've got a lot of informed farmers on switchgrass production in the province, and hope to see you on another day in person. Thanks so much for following the presentation.